You are watching DHTV from California State University, Dominguez Hills.
Okay, now that we have gone over the era between 1930 to 1960, let's revisit again the cycles of change. Again, anti-democratic forces are always pitted against progressive reform. And so between 1930 to 1960, we can kind of see this cycle repeat itself again in the form of socialist organizing that's influencing progressive reform. Let's understand the socialist tradition again. The socialist tradition came out as a result. In the 1920s, the progressive era ended, sort of quieted progressive reform. But in the 1930s, as we see, the socialist organizing picks up again, and we see a generation now demanding change. So we can go to the next slide of socialist organizing influencing reform. The Great Depression. The Great Depression created such conditions that led to tremendous starvation. I mean, people were literally starving to death in the United States. Unemployment had mushroomed, and there was spontaneous rebellion throughout the United States with regards to the fact that the majority of the people were struggling to survive. And here we see the most important socialist organization that's influencing reform was the rise of the Committee of Industrial Organizations that became the Congress of Industrial Organizations. We see the influence of the sit-down strikes, demanding the 8-hour day, the 40-hour week, compensation. It influenced the regulatory state. And so we have the significance of Franklin Roosevelt, what we call the New Deal. The New Deal created conditions that we benefit from today, still to this day, especially with regards to the 8-hour day, overtime pay, workers' compensation, and then most importantly at this time, because of starvation, the fact that there is the Social Security Act, which provided for aid to families with dependent children. And then it was also influenced into existence by Harry Truman's Fair Deal. So we have a socialist organizing influencing presidential administrations to make sure that deals are cut on behalf of people. So this was significant for the 1930s, the New Deal, and the 1940s, Harry Truman's Fair Deal. But then we go into a conservative reaction to the regulatory state. And again, what we see is that World War II is going to pull the rug underneath the socialists, and it's going to quiet progressive reform. At this particular time, after World War II, the United States and the Soviet Union, as well as China, are going to create conditions for what is known as the Cold War, and Senator Eugene McCarthy is going to come in and try to challenge everyone's loyalty to the United States. It is at this time that conservative reaction, they put God into the Pledge of Allegiance. God is put into the Pledge of Allegiance at this time because of the fear. Again, this is known as the Second Red Scare. It's known as Mccarthyism. Just to challenge the the Congress of Industrial Organizations, which was organized by the Socialist and Communist parties. They had tremendous influence in labor at the time. They will begin to purge the leadership of the CIO. The CIO, instead of maintaining itself as a separate entity, will merge with the Conservative American Federation of Labor to create the AFL-CIO, and hence quiet anybody who was demanding changes, especially with regards to women's rights, immigrant rights, and labor rights. War became institutionalized. President Dwight Eisenhower is going to, in his farewell speech, is going to warn the nation of this rise of a military-industrial complex, of a conservative agenda that's going to take over the federal government. And of course, in the 1950s, the idea was to return to the traditional values of a society that's going to emphasize mom, God, country, and apple pie. And in this particular case, with regards to the 1950s, we see a reaction. There's what is known as the baby boom, the rise of suburbia, where everybody can leave the inner city and leave behind everybody who's living in abject poverty. So again, the conservative reaction to the regulatory state. So here we see another cycle again, where anti-democratic forces are pitted against progressive reform. In the 1930 to 1960, that cycle occurs again, where the socialist organizing is influencing reform, especially to Roosevelt's New Deal and Harry Truman's Fair Deal. And then there's a conservative reaction to the regulatory state, as we see it in this particular slide, where there's, again, a return to traditional values.